these boots and I want to go back. I just want to relax on the couch. For me, it was like I wanted to keep going. The more I did, the better I felt.
Okay, so now I had that written down here as what would you recommend as a first barefoot high peaks? So you had Street and 9. Now, is that because those trails are definitely dirt/mud, pretty much the whole trail?
Yes.
Not a lot of rocks.
Right.
Not a lot of... I mean, it's rugged, but the ruggedness is like stepping over just so much blowdown.
Right. The ruggedness is more about like, navigating the trail, let's say, as opposed to what the trail actually feels like. The trail on 9th Street is, it's the best on your feet. It felt good the entire time. And I think it's just how soft it is. So yeah, that would be my number one recommendation for the first one.
Okay. Now what was, you said Cliff and Redfield was your hardest, but that was also earlier on. Were there any mountains in particular where they were a little more brutal on your feet or challenging for you?
Okay, good question. Rocky Peak, Ridge, and Giant, I did probably one of the fastest. I was kind of trying to challenge myself with it because I knew most of it was like the granite rocks, right?
Sure.
So, and like I said before, if your eyes know what you're going to feel, you can go faster because you know how it's going to work. So because that was mostly granite, I did those very quickly. But by the end of it, because the way I did it is I started at the Route 86 one, so I went up Giant that way, down Rocky Peak, and then I came back. So there's a lot of up and down with that. And I think because I kind of pushed myself a little bit there, the faster you go on the granite, the more your feet wear down. So you have to be careful with that. Like, you can't go too fast. And I think I learned that on that one. By the time I was done with that one, my feet were a little bit on fire. And I think it was just because of how much friction I put between myself and the rocks that entire time.
Now, did you ever catch a root? That's like, in my brain, what I picture being the worst is that root you catch and you didn't expect it. And it's just, or like jamming a toe into something you didn't expect and stub it. I mean, if there's anything that's going to make me burn my house down, and it's going to be when I stub my toe, because I lose my mind. It's like my biggest pet peeve is stubbing my toes. So are there any times where you experienced that you caught a root or you stubbed your toe? Or...
Yeah, there's a few times I did. Probably at least a few times on every one of the hikes.
Okay, so it wasn't unusual to constantly be dealing with that.
It's not constant, but it's at least on all of the hikes. I probably experienced it a few times, but you learn really quickly.
Sure, I bet. Yeah.
You really do, because once you do it, you're like, I don't want to do this again. Like, that wasn't fun. So you're really looking at the ground a lot more. So you're kind of looking. It's one step at a time, and eventually you get to the end. But you really need to look at the ground and pay attention where you're going to step next.
Okay. Now, were there any other? Take us through. So the last thing we talked about, you hit Algonquin, Iroquois, and Wright, and you felt the best. So what was next after?
Okay, so I think
going through that?
So after that one was I had done Giant Rocky Peak, because I had felt so good, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's why I did it a little bit too fast.
Got it.
It was like, okay, I got this. Like, I just did those ones. They were super, not super easy, but way easier than the other ones. And I've kind of figured out how to do this now. So I kind of killed Rocky Peak, Ridge, and Giant by going as fast as I can. And that one, I was like, okay, I'm glad I did it that way, but if I'm going to do a longer one, I need to realize I need to tone it down. I can't go that fast. Sure. So after that one, we did, actually this was with our good friends. You know the Izzos at all?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So Sandy and Elizabeth came with us on this one. It was myself, Rhiannon, and Sandy and Elizabeth. And we did the Santanonis.
Okay.
That was, the beginning was rough because it was roads going in. But
I had that one in my brain, too. I was going to ask you about the road. Because I was at the Santanonis just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
With Josh, actually.
Nice.
And we talked about you. That's when I heard about what you were doing barefoot. Yeah. And you were about to finish at that point. And I was like, we were talking about the road as soon as you start. Like,
it's terrible.
Talk about Legos, Adirondack Legos.
They're the worst.
That road in particular.
Terrible. You just got to go on the side of it. It's that was a terrible part of it. But other than once you got off that road, it was great. And we went up and we did Panther first. I figured it was better to go farther and then come back and, because by the time you come down the express, you're closer to the car.
Yeah,
so
sure.
it's just like, yes, I'm getting a little closer. So that was the next one. It was a great experience because we had Sandy and Elizabeth with us. It was a really fun time. We had our dogs with us on that one too. Made it a little bit more challenging. Every time we take the dogs, it was a little bit more challenging just because they pull and things like that. But after that one, I believe we did. Yes. Do you know who James Gann is?
I do not know.
Okay, he's been doing Barefoots too, and I believe he is at almost 30 now.
Cool.
He started about 4 or 5 years ago, so he heard that I was doing this, and he wanted to do one of the ranges that he hasn't done yet. So we decided to do the Dick's range next.
Okay.
So he came with me. We did all 5. But I know everyone and the first time I did it too, you go up the Macomb slide, right?
Yep,
I mean, that's
sure.
the way to do it. You don't want to go down that.
Sure.
But the way I'm thinking about this barefoot-wise is I didn't want to do that first because I knew, learning from the way Rocky Peak Ridge and Giant was that hard granite was going to, if I'm going up it, it's going to not hurt my feet, but kind of wear them down. So instead of doing that first, I decided to go up the Beckhorn and then back down the slide. And I think that was a really good choice because if I would have done it the other way, I don't think I would have been able to make it out coming back after that slide. So we kind of walked on down the slide. It was kind of crab crawl. It took a long time to get down, but once we got to the bottom, it was basically home free.
Sure.
And it was really cool to have done a big day like that because I think that was our biggest day so far.
Okay, yeah, that was definitely your first 5-peaker, first
Yeah.
big day. Now, doing that day in particular, you said you were kind of crawling out or like tired towards the end. How long were you out there for that? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that one, it wasn't as long as Cliff and Redfield, but I think we were 14 hours.
Yeah, it's a big day.
It's
a big day.
You just like I said, you don't. One of the bigger things I've learned with it is you don't think about time and you don't think about miles.
Mm-hmm.
You know the goal is this is what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to. I love starting early. I started most of them at like 3-4 in the morning.
Sure, I'm the same way. Yeah.
I love starting early, starting up, and then we're seeing the birds start coming up, and then the sun coming, or the birds start talking, the sun start coming up, and be like, oh wow, I'm already this far into it. Like this is so cool. That kind of gives you motivation to keep going. But it was more like, I don't care how long this is going to take me. I just know I'm going to be in here for the day. And when I get home, I get home. Mm-hmm. Because if you start rushing it and thinking about time, one mistake can ruin the entire hike. And I think that's the biggest thing with it is, you can do, let's say, all 5 peaks of the, in the Dick's range, and then you're on the way down the Macomb slide and you get too excited and you fall and you hurt you hurt your foot to the point where you need to put your boots on and go home. Then you got to come back and do it all over again.
Sure. Yeah. You kind of ruin it at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And I like to start at night too because I always say miles in the dark don't count. So like if it's like the sun comes
I like
up,
that too. You're right. It doesn't count.
You're 4 miles in before the sun comes up. And it's like I'm already done.
Now it doesn't even count. Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
And when I did the Northville Placid Trail hiking, I had the same mentality because it's like I'm out here and I'm camping, I'm backpacking. So it didn't matter how long it took me to hike the days because it's like this is who I am right now. This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. I'm camping. Yep. So it is definitely a good mindset when you're doing that, and I could totally see how that mindset of it takes however long it takes because I'm here in the present. This is what I'm doing is what matters most. And I could see how this in particular would take that same mindset. Absolutely.
It really does. It takes the mindset out of, how quick I'm going to do it because I know I just need to get this done today and I'm going to enjoy every step of it, every moment of it. And it takes out like, let's put the Marcy Dam 2 miles, like, that famous 2 miles of like everyone goes in. It's like you got the 2 miles and the last 2 miles out is out and no one really even like thinks about it. But it's one of my favorite parts of hiking from the lodge now is how great it feels on your feet. Like even at the end, it's like, oh, thank God I've got these last 2 miles. I know that sounds crazy, but it does sound crazy, but it's like, oh, thank God I have these last 2 miles. They're going to be a great last 2 miles as opposed to like Cliff and Redfield going from the Upper Works, those last 2 miles, horrible. So it really changes the experience of hiking to conditions of the trail instead of elevation or mileage or anything like that.
Now, when you'd cross rivers or be at rivers, would you always like wash your feet off and dunk them into the water?
Oh, yeah.
Or would that? Okay.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like we did when we did Sawteeth, the bridge was still out at the upper or the lower Osable Lake, which was fine for me because I put Rhiannon on my back. I carried her across.
Nice.
I left both our packs on the side. I put her on my back. I walked across the river because your boots are your feet, so they dry out really quickly. I walked her across the river, came back, grabbed our packs, and we went up that way. So finding rivers and things, and actually another hike we did. It was one of probably I think it was the third to last one. I did Colden and Marshall because I had to do Marshall again. Seeing as I hadn't started. I did that with James as well. In that day, it was rainy, cold. I think there was like 50, 60-mile winds at the top. But basically, we walked down the river the whole time. And, yes, it made it cold. But it's funny. Like, your feet don't prune like you would think like it would be in the bathtub. I don't know why that is. But we were in water the whole day, and I was happy that we had barefoot. If I had my boots on, I feel like they would have been worse off.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, were your feet ever slippery? Was like the mud slippery mud?
Good
feet
question.
On the mud, on the rocks? How did that work out?
Great question. I think the rocks, I had better traction. The only thing that I didn't have great traction with is, that black mud that where you see people like their boots that have already slid when you're looking up at it.
Totally.
That's the place where you have no control. And I've fallen a few times doing that. That's where the only disadvantage I saw was that black mud. If you step on that, your feet's going to go out in a second. Other than that, no, I think I had better traction.
Cool. Even when your feet are like kind of covered in mud and you're like, let's say the trail like Algonquin where it's hopping from rock to rock, even then you had better traction.
Yeah, it's almost like as soon as you get your feet out of the mud, once you hit rock, they grab right onto it. It's not a problem. The only problem is when it's feet on mud. That one, they slide right out when it happens.
Okay, so you finished the Dick's Range and it was a success overall.
Oh, it was a great success. That one was a really fun time. I had a wonderful day with James that day. My next one was 9th Street. That one I did right after that, and that's why I thought it was such a great hike because I had challenged myself with the Dick's Range, and that was only 2 days before that. So I had done the Dick's Range on a Wednesday. I did 9th Street on a Friday. And I was like, wow, this is the easiest one yet. And I know my feet, I just did the whole Dick's Range, but no, they felt amazing on that one. So after that, I decided to do the biggest one. I think this was probably the biggest one I did. It was Gray, Skylight, Marcy, Tabletop, and Phelps.
That's a big day.
It was. Because after I finished the Dick's Range, that's when I kind of said, okay, where am I going with this year? Like, all right, so I think I was up to, let me look again. Dick's Range was 14 to 18. So I was up to 18 after the Dick's Range. And I was like, okay, where do I, then I did 9th Street, and they were easy. So that got me up to 20. I was like, okay, I might be able to do this.
Yeah, you're approaching the halfway point at that point.
Yeah, and I wasn't telling anybody this, but in my own mind, I was like, I might be able to do this year. So I want to challenge myself. And instead of doing, what I was, back in my head, what I was going to do was Gray, Skylight, and Marcy. That's kind of what I've done before. I was like, no, let me challenge myself a little bit, and let's do Tabletop and Phelps too. I did it, and honestly, it was... that's what I'm saying. Like every hike, I kind of challenged myself a little more, but it got better. The harder it was, the happier I was. It really, every high peak I did, like when I was finishing on Phelps after that whole day, I ran up Phelps. I know that sounds crazy, but I really did. I felt so good that I was like, no, I'm just going to crush this last peak. And I did. I ran up Phelps and I got to the top, and I don't remember the name of the couple that was up there, but they're like, wait, you just did that barefoot? I was like, yep. And they're like, so you get it all the way from the lodge? And I was like, yeah, but I did it a little bit different. I did
by
Gray.
Way of Marcy, Skylight, Gray, and
they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, no, I really did. And I showed them pictures, and they kind of congratulated me on going through that. And I think that was the first day that people started noticing me, and that was a really fun part of this, kind of taking myself back a little bit.